Good afternoon. Welcome to Rolling Out's Meet the Author. I'm your host, Tigner. Meet the Author is part of Rolling Out's book club series where I talk with authors about their new books and, of course, what inspires them to write. Today on Meet the Author, I have the phenomenal author, professor, and poet, Honorée Jeffers. Ms. Jeffers has penned over 5 poetry collections, including one in 2020, the 2020 collection of The Age of Phyllis, which won the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work in Poetry and was long listed for the National Book Award for Poetry. Ms. Jeffers is a professor and teaches creative writing and literature at the University of Oklahoma. Today, we are going to have a conversation focusing on Honorée's debut fictional novel, the love songs of W.E.B. DuBois. Love Songs is a historical fiction which chronicles the journey of an American family through centuries. It's also a Black feminist novel, which highlights the one Allie Pearl Garfield and her journey through her family, through school, through relationships. It touches on a lot of things that impacts women, from sexual relationships, love, sex, parenting, growing up in a diverse community, racism. This book is really close to being an epic novel that is impact with a lot of information, a lot of knowledge about our history, anything from slavery, the appropriation of land from Indians, and what it was like growing up in the South. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to Meet the Author, none other than the author herself, professor, poet, Honorée Jeffers. How are you doing this afternoon?
I am well, and I'm just really, really happy to be here, my brother. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited. I actually had an opportunity when I first got the book. This is a big book.
It's a chubby book.
This is a big book. And when I got it, I said, okay. And I already knew that you were a poet. So when I saw it, the first thing, that's what you get for judging a book by its cover and not reading. This is a big book about poetry. That's going to be a lot. And so as more I kept reading, I said, oh no, this is actually a novel.
Yes, it's my first novel.
This is a novel.
Yeah.
And over 700 pages.
It's 816 pages.
This is a big book.
It's chubby.
So it's, as you say, it's a chubby book.
But you can't talk about the history of Black people going all the way back
in 300 words, 300 pages.
And 200 pages. You just can't do that.
You can't do it. I have to ask you, what is the backstory of the title? The Love Songs of W.E.B. DuBois.
And I'm so glad you pronounced it right. Well, you went to Morehouse, so there you go.
Yes, it is.
Right. So W.B. Du Bois, so there's a backstory in the novel, but for my backstory, you went to an historically Black college, an HBCU, and I did as well. I went to Talladega College. My mother taught. My mother graduated from Spelman College. My 2 sisters graduated from Spelman College. My daddy taught at Howard with Toni Morrison. So there's a big history. And anytime you attend a historically Black college, you're gonna read Du Bois.
Yes.
You're in a political science class, if you're in a history class, if you're in a literature class, if you're a social work major, you are going to read Du Bois. So I first encountered him when I was a teenager. And one of the things, even, I was a precocious teenager, I read a lot. One of the things that I noticed, excuse me, was that he really loved Southern Black people.
Yes.
Okay. So as I later on, when I began just, when the David Levering Lewis biography of now I'm like, it is David Levering Lewis. I always do this. I always have a brain thing. When his biography, the 2-volume biography came out, that's when I realized that Dr. Du Bois had gone to Fisk, okay, that he taught at Atlanta University twice. He was there in the very late 1800s, moving into the early 1900s, and then he came back, like, I think it was 30 years later. And so he has had this abiding love for Black people. He loved Southern Black people. And the protagonist of the novel, Ailey Pearl Garfield, she's named after Alvin Ailey and her grandma, her great-grandma Pearl. She discovers this abiding love. And so as we move through the novel, Dr. Du Bois's words are at the beginning of each section. And his words inform, the what's going to happen.
Yes.
You begin to understand, oh, okay, this is why, I worked on that for a long time. And by the end of the novel, no spoilers, but Ailey has accessed this deep and abiding love. And,
yes, she did.
And so that is one of the reasons that I called it the love songs. He also, he had, his personal life, and that's the way all of us are. He had, a little stuff going on in his personal life, but in his writings, he really loved Black women too. So a lot of people have been confused. This is a Black feminist book. Why is this W.B. Du Bois? He was a feminist before his time. He was very much about the rights of women. And so that's why it's called the love songs, the W.B. Du Bois.
Okay, I like that. And you're correct. As reading it, each song or each new book, it has a little paragraph or a quote or a statement from W.E.B. Du Bois, which kind of gives a segue to that next segment, which I actually liked. So was it a deliberate decision to write this book? I know I've read that it took over 10 years. So was it really deliberate of putting this together? I know it had to be, you had to take time to put it all together to make one chubby book.
Well, now, it's interesting. When I first started writing this book, and a lot of people kind of laugh about this, I just wanted to write a popular book, like a commercial book, right? For
interesting.
Like, nearly romance, not all the way romance, but nearly romance. Because what had happened was my agent, when I got my agent in 2005, I still have her. We're very tight, Sarah Burns, and I was just writing short stories then, and that's all I ever wanted to write. And she was like, "There's no money in short stories." She kept it real with me. Ain't no money in short stories. And so I made the mistake of promising her that I would write a novel because I really dug her, and I go off on vibes. That's how I've always been. When I was younger, I wouldn't believe my vibes. Now I very much believe my vibes. I go off on vibes. So I wanted to keep her. And so I promised that I would write this novel. And so originally it was, just about Ailey. There was no deep drama, right?
Yes.
It was just a family, kind of on the surface. And then what began happening was I started having these dreams. And in the dreams, these people would come to me and I would see them. And gradually over a period of time, I would start seeing the landscape, and there was a plantation house in the background.
Oh,
and
wow.
So then I knew that these dreams were about enslaved people. Now you got to understand, this was when I was a much younger woman. And so this was very scary. like I would wake up and I would write and I wouldn't know where it would come from. And so the language that's different in the songs is because it really was just like a long prose poem. I would have these long, kind of lyrical, things happening. And then about a year or two passed, and I realized these were not two projects, that these were Ailey's family, her ancestors. And then I had to begin to figure out how did they work together, because some people were like, this is two different books. Now, my agent, she was just like, you do you, and I'm gonna sell it. You know what I'm saying? But other people were like, this is two different books. And so that's what happened, And
I can see that. Yes, I do. I could see two books, but I know it was a bold leap to put together 800 pages. But I like the fact that you did encapsulate everything in one book, opposed to book 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever, to get the story out. So here it is, all in one. And you also took I've only seen it done a few times with Black authors, but I think you did a great job of how you bridged the past to the past to the current.
You really make me feel good saying that, my brother. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, yeah, but it did.
Well, the thing is, and then we're gonna get back to how it ended up 800 pages, because that was not the book that was sold. Okay. Right. But even though he's a white man, William Faulkner famously said, the past isn't dead. It isn't even past. Okay. And in African-American communities, we see that writ large in our community, and then down to the family, right? Yes. We see the mass incarceration of Black men and women, okay? And that is a direct consequence of enslavement. Yes. We know that there was enslavement, and then after the Civil War and after Reconstruction was over, then they would do things like pick up Black men for loitering, right? And then rent them to plantation owners, right? So there was peonage, and that continued. And then even now, I remember back in the day, there was a dude that I guess we dated, right? And I remember he had been in prison, and he talked about how they would send white farmers to the prison and rent them, and then he and his fellow inmates would be picking their potatoes and doing all that kind of stuff. This goes all the way, right? In the same way, when we look at, for example, the abuse of Black women, right? And certainly what we see in the news is more focused on Black men, but Black women are killed by the police too. But one thing that doesn't get highlighted is the abuse of Black women physically, intimately. I'm going to try to a little bit, I don't want to trigger people, by the police. That happens a lot.
All out, yes.
And then the adultification of Black children, okay? So that our children do not get to be children. They're always calling a Black child a young woman, a young man, and they're 9 years old, 10 years old, these sort of things. Or I shot him dead because I thought he was a grown man, and so on and so forth. And these are very, very traumatic issues in our community. But I felt like if somebody didn't talk about these things, right, that you know, because you get scared because you don't want to trigger people, right? You don't want people to be upset, but at the same time, I hear my folks on social media, I have friends, I have family, and they're constantly saying, we were not taught this in school. We were not taught this. So, brother, let me tell you how the issue of abuse of children ran through the book. Initially, it was not there. So when I was doing research on 18th century Georgia, right, as sort of the background for the songs, right, I discovered that the age of intimate consent, again, I'm trying to use particular language, for free white children in Georgia was 10. Okay. So when you use your logical thinking skills, right, it's obvious that if they were doing this with free white kids, right, marrying
what are they going to do with black?
What are they going to do with black kids? This is why I like talking to my folks, right? What are they going to do with us and our kids? And that's when you know, it's a very difficult storyline, but that's what I began to think about. And then I also began to think about, there were always moments when I would do poetry readings down south where a little old white lady would come up to me and say, you remind me of my maid, Linda, or whatever, you know, and I'd have on this $500 outfit or whatever, right? When I was younger and I couldn't afford, you know, I was still, you know, we black women, we gonna be cute.
Go find a way to.
We gonna be cute, right? We gonna be cute. So I'd be like, her maid, you know, where she'd say, I was raised by this, you know, and it really would infuriate me, right? But there was a moment, this is what happens, you know, late in the midnight hour, you know, when I'm talking to my God. And you know, I'm talking to the Lord and it comes to me, what if you lean into family instead of leaning away from it? Like these women are saying, she was just like my mama, or she was there, and you're getting offended, right? Because you don't pay people to love you. Okay.
Oh, that's correct. Right.
And then also, if you really love them, they don't have no Social Security. You paying them, you know, poverty wages. And if that, right? My grandmother was a domestic. And then, you know, if you really love them, why are you maintaining this system of white supremacy?
Right.
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 So I began to lean into this notion of family, thinking about, what does it mean when you have people who are related to you by blood and you have all the power in a family and they have none? And so that began, that was one of the, I'm always wondering about, how did we get to this place as a nation, in race relations, as a community, as family?
You touched on that quite a bit as you bridged the songs together, as you would go back and forth. I saw that. We're going to talk a little bit about it, but what would you say was the hardest part of writing this book?
Oh, most definitely the trauma toward children.
Yes, that was hard.
Most definitely.
That was hard.
But you know what else, my brother? I also, as we begin, so it's interesting when you first start writing a book, you know, you just get in where you fit in, right? You're writing the first draft and you're talking to your muse, which in my case, you know, is God. In someone else's cases, you know, I try not to shove my faith down somebody's throat, but I am a faithful person.
Good. We can speak freely.
Okay, then. Right. And, you know, as the great, late great Dr. Maya Angelou used to say, it's only 2 Black atheists in the world. Right. You know, so, you know, I would I would, I would just be writing. But then as we moved from our beloved, President Barack Obama into a different time, and that's all I'll say. And then there were these children, kept in these cages at the border. They stay with me. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
And you begin to think about the trafficking of children. And for me, I'm always astonished that people don't see these continuums from the historical
Connection. Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
But for me, I always see it, right? And I'm a child-free woman, but I'm an auntie. I don't like people who are not related to me to call me auntie, because there's a whole,
as a whole, yes.
Right. But a lot of people, young folks don't get that. They don't understand auntie. You calling an unrelated Black woman auntie who's not a friend of the family or your actual aunt, there's a whole thing. But, as an auntie, I think about my niece who's grown now, and then she has children, my nephew who's grown now, and then he has children. And it hurts. It hurts real bad. And so I began to say that sometimes, even if you're scared of how people are going to respond, they have to know. They have to know. And for those of us who write about the ancestors, it is both our duty and our privilege, and it's an honor to do so. And so when the ancestors begin to speak to you, not trying to get too deep, you have to listen. You can't ignore that. Some people write about slavery, don't tend ancestral altars, and that's okay. Everybody doesn't have to. But for those of us who do and who listen to the ancestors, we know that we are here for that purpose. That is our purpose in life. And so that was the hardest, because you got to go to a lot of real hard places.
Yes, and you did. I can tell.
You got to go to you got to go through a lot of pain, because your characters become real people to you. And so when they hurt, you hurt. And I remember talking to a friend of mine saying, I'm just crying so much. And she said, well, if you don't cry, how can you convince somebody that this is real? Like, there are a lot of people now that actually think this is the story of my whole family. They're like, you're Ailey, right? I'm like, no, they have to be real to you. So that was the most painful part. Yes.
Speaking of characters, and thank you for that answer. As a great answer, because I know that you had to delve deep into it, and it had to be painful as it was depicted in the novel with Ailey. Character development. How much of these are you draw from to build your characters? Are you drawing from real people, or or how real are the characters in real life? Are any of these parallel to you? Not necessarily Allie, but are any of them, depicting anything of you, Honorée?
No. What I will, one of the things is, and that's one of the reasons it took me 9 years to write the book that was sold to HarperCollins, right?
Okay.
That book was 450 pages. Then when I got with my editor, Erin Wicks at Harper Books, right, which is one of the little subsidiaries of HarperCollins, she was just like, she was just all in. And it was really interesting because she's a young white woman, but she just got me. And that was really weird, because I'm not used to anybody getting me, but especially a young white woman. She just got me, and she just trusted. And she said to me, I want you to go even deeper even
Wow.
further. And I said, well, you know, the book is really long. And she said, okay, you know, we'll cut. And so I turned in 700 pages. And I was like, okay, well, you know this is really long, so I've been thinking about how to cut it, blah, blah, blah. And she said, no, this is great. In fact, I want you to do even more.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was terrified. But in terms of, so what I'm saying is when you're writing a book over, 9 years, then 2 more years to edit, you get to know these people. And there are things, brother, that you feel that that you depict because you're creating a world where you can figure things out. And we can't always do that in real life.
No.
So one of the things that when people say, is this real? It's a reality I wish existed. Even the bad parts, at least I can understand the bad, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
But when bad things happen in real life, I'm just like, I just can't understand.
Yeah, it is hard. It's hard to understand the bad things. But I have to say, just as you gave the definition of how you're able to almost understand it in the book, life is pretty much the same way. We tend to not want to accept whatever bad. Any one of the songs in here from Lydia was that
the oldest daughter.
That's right,
Everybody loves Lydia, even though hers is a very,
yes,
a difficult story, and everybody loves Uncle Ruth.
Uncle Ruth is the guy. He is the guy.
You know what, my brother? I knew that there were going to be some bad Black men in the book. And I needed a tender Black man.
He was that guy.
He's that guy. He gets Ailey. He gets young folks. I needed somebody who was loved and who loved, and that he was always that shoulder that somebody could lean on. I needed a Black man like that in the book.
What made him even better is that he could pass for white.
Right, but he refused.
He refused.
Mm-hmm.
He could have been the bourgeoisie.
That's right.
He could have been anything that most Black people of his stature and complexion would have done.
Mm-hmm.
But he chose to stand on the right side.
And to live among the people.
His people.
Right, the working class Black folks and these dark brown Black folks, and he married a dark brown. And I knew a few Black men. Now, so when you're talking about what did I draw in real life? When I was growing up, the common, picture was dark skin, because my parents were, it's interesting. My mother comes from working class people and she was dark brown. My father came from very Black bourgeoisie people, right? But he was a Black nationalist. And so I think he made a concerted effort to find someone, right? But when I was growing up in Durham, before my parents separated, once my parents separated, then I moved into the hood, okay? So I've been poor and I've been middle class, all right? So when you talk about are some of the things drawn from that, I've seen both sides.
Both sides, yes.
These aren't real people, but I've seen the milieu. I've seen the surroundings. I know how people are. I know color struck, how people would respond to my mother, because she was not only dark brown, she had very full African features. She's still living. And so, yes, so that was one of the things that I drew from. I lived on Camilton Road, okay, in Atlanta. So I remember that. Okay, I remember that.
The good years of Camilton Road, or
what'd you say?
the good years of Camilton Road, or
I mean, I don't know what Camden Road is now. I lived on Camden Road in the 80s.
Okay, that was about that time.
It was
a cross at
make
that
sure
time.
his head wrap don't come off. It was a, as we say, a transitional neighborhood.
Yes, that's a very good. That was a transitional.
It was a transitional. So I lived in Atlanta before the Olympics came. Now I don't even recognize parts of Atlanta, right? Yeah. But yes, there was. So before my parents separated, we lived in Durham, North Carolina. So my parents were of the artists class, right? So they were both highly educated, and they were Black nationalists, and my mother was very politically involved. And then what would happen is people would have these sort of like, they'd have voting rights drives or whatever. And my father, who was a Black arts movement poet, would come and read his poetry and, I remember my mother made red, black, and green cupcakes, right? Oh, wow. Right. And when I was little, we weren't even allowed to eat vanilla ice cream in my house.
Wow.
The only time we had vanilla is when they couldn't find the chocolate, and they get that, what do they call it? Neapolitan.
Yeah, the Neapolitan.
Right.
Oh, so I would have been in trouble.
Right. Chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla. Oh, it was deep. It was deep. When we would go to football games, that, my parents would stand and raise their fists, right? And all of that, right? So yes, when you see, when Belle and Jeff, Ailey's mother and father before Ailey's married, and they're living in the hood, and it sort of changes to the Black power movement. I knew that, but those are not real people. So right. So there are backgrounds that I understood. My grandmother, lived in the country, right? But she lived in town. They had, and she was very proud of that. They had set her down, her children or whatever. So there was all of that. Then when I did draw upon my knowledge of impoverished Black neighborhoods when I wrote about Lydia.
Okay, yes.
Yes, so.
And you can see that throughout the book. I think that you did a great job of depicting communities. Though it's a fictional book, and yes, you talked about a lot of historical points and locations, I think that it was crafted in a way that made it very realistic, that you can see for every story or song that you wrote about, it was real.
It was. I wanted it to be real. I know I'm just talking. I wanted it to be real. There was a moment with first readers, not with my agent, because she just loved everything I did, but and who don't want to hear that? But right. There were other first readers who were really adamant that I take out the long section about Ailey at a historically Black college.
I'm glad you did.
I was insistent that we have that, because that is not an aspect of Black communities that we know. We've seen a bit of it with Ralph Ellison's, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, because he was at Tuskegee. We see some of it in some other people, but I wanted people to see, because one of the biggest things too that I'm doing in this book is decentering whiteness, right?
Yes.
This is a Black book. That's what I do with all of my work. All my poems or my essays. This is a Black book, and it's a Black woman's book, a Black feminist book. But I wanted people to see who we truly were when there are no white people in the room. Okay.
Yes.
I wanted white readers to see that too, because I was straight no chaser. You know, there's the N word, there's, you know, all of that. I wanted people to see, what do our communities truly look like, you know?
Yes. Yes. You touched on that. Yes, you peppered in, you know, the parts where you had to bring in white characters.
Yes.
But this is a Black book, to the point. Each character was alive. I love Allie. Allie was that kind of strong young lady.
Yes. And she's not skinny. You know,
right. I didn't see that until close to the end, when it was, because it never was said until further into the book, and it finally started talking about she loved to eat. She
loved to eat, and we used to call a sister like that, big boned.
Big bone.
A big boned sister, right? And it's never an issue until, you know,
we got outside
of the Black community, because when I was growing up, those kind of sisters, like, you know, brothers were like, hey, I see you, you know? And so I wanted that. I wanted a thick sister.
Yes.
Be the center. I wanted a cocoa brown sister to be considered beautiful. I wanted all of that. Certainly colorism is in the book, right?
Yes.
But I wanted people to see a very deeply brown Black woman and a thick Black woman to be the heroine. That's what I needed. Yes.
And you did a good job. I think that you did that well. And I think that it showed, even in their flaws and their weaknesses, it also showed strength from each one of them, from Coco to Lydia to Allie. But as in us as humans, we, as great as we may be in our own talents and crafts, we still have our own Achilles heels, our flaws.
Yes.
And that was depicted. Allie was the one who really was kind of the bold one, the renegade, the one who didn't have a problem with stepping out and speaking her mind. I like that. And she did it in a very eloquent way. It wasn't, you know, very boisterous, but she still got a point across.
Yeah.
Was that intentional, to be able to paint that picture of showing her that she was able to speak her mind, but yet do it in a ladylike way, to still keep her feminine strength, but not becoming the angry Black woman?
Well, that was also one of the things that I wanted to represent, this tug of war that Black women have, where we are constantly, you know, our attitudes are policed, our bodies are policed, our reputations are policed, right? And I wanted Ailey to be struggling against that. You know, that's why it's a feminist, you know, or womanist book. I wanted her to be, and there are these sort of literary cameos where we always talk about Alice Walker's The Color Purple, right? Because Alice Walker is the person that invented that term, womanism, right?
Okay.
Or Black feminism. I wanted people to see the struggle that Ailey and other Black women go through, trying to adhere to the politics of respectability, but also trying to be themselves. And also, how can you be strong and resistant against sexism, but still love your community and still love your people?
Yes.
Because there are so many Black women like that, you know, where they're resisting, you know, sexism, but they still are ride or die for this community. And, you know, when you say someone that I'm influenced by, I am ride or die for Black people. And so that is one of the, but I'm also a rebel. And so I was a rebel. My family didn't even care about my writing, but when I won that NAACP award,
that's my baby.
Woo! They were like, "Hey, cuz." I'm like, "Okay." Right. But that was exciting.
That's funny, but it's sad but true. That is.
It is. But the artist world is not really known to a lot of Black people,
No.
And so
especially the literary side.
The literary side, it's very difficult, but I think they're very proud of me. I am a full professor. I'm the first Black full professor in the history of the English department at my university.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Oh my goodness.
And it was a journey. And that's all I'm gonna say. It was a journey, my brother. But yes, and so, but my mother is a professor. She's since retired, and my father was a professor. But I am 4 to 5 generations removed from slavery, and I always think about that.
That's amazing. And it's sad and amazing at the same time.
You know what? It really is. And, I'm 5 generations removed from slavery. And I think about that all the time.
And we're still doing a lot of firsts.
We're still, even in the 21st century, we're still doing that. I think about that. My mother's father, I don't use the word illiterate. I find that very rude. He could not read and write.
Yes.
So I think about his daughter she's the first person in the family. Mom was the first person in the family to earn a doctorate.
Wow.
I don't have a doctorate. I have a master's of fine arts. And I remember when we were at the family reunion, they would always call her Dr. Jeffers. They would call her doctor, like a little pet name,
Right. It also is in contrast that you see, you hear the history of the Tuskegee Airmen. Mm-hmm. And that was during World War II in the 40s. Mm-hmm. And you had all of these Black pilots, but here we are now in 2020, and that number is small in comparison. Mm-hmm. It's like, and no different from Hidden Figures, the movie. We had all these sisters who were working in Nassau, but every time you see a picture of Nassau now, you
don't see them. Right. you don't see it. And I think it's the same thing when you talk about academia, right? I follow a lot of Black women. It's so funny because when I see these women, I'm fangirling. I'm like, oh my God, there's Dr. Da-da-da-da. And they're like, go ahead, sister, you do your thing, and it's really beautiful, right? But I think about it, we're still such a tiny, Black people, period, are a tiny, tiny percentage of tenured, and then full is it's very tiny. And then Black women, it's incremental. It's really tiny.
Yeah.
It's really tiny. And the things that we have to go through, I signed that letter of protest with Sister Nicole Hannah Jones with that situation with UNC. And we all could relate. All the Black women, we were on Twitter talking about it. We all there, it was like she had a national platform.
But that's not always the case. Yeah.
But that's not always the case. But we all could recognize it. And we were all talking about it, and even those of us who have full professor, like I said, I won't go into it, the journey, but the things that we had to go through. And we always have to be 3, 4, 5, 6 times as
smarter. Advanced,
everything. You can't lose your temper, students talking to you any kind of way. and you're having to constantly, you know, keep your cool or whatever. So I wasn't shocked that that Sister Nicole went to Howard. I mean, HBCUs have their issues as well, but you know, she brought all of that money with her, so we do know she's getting paid. Right. She brought
that was the win. That was the win.
Right. That was the win. She brought that $20 million to the Mecca. And, so, you know, they're paying her. And it is my hope to see a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at Howard University very soon. I think it's past time to see you know, creative writing at Howard, you know.
How important is it for us as Blacks to have Black authors and to be able to tell our own stories?
Oh, brother, it's tremendously important. It's essential that we have, it's essential not only that we have Black authors, it's essential to have Black literary agents, Black editors, you know, Black executives at these large, you know, at these huge publishing conglomerates. I always talk about, I'm a faithful person because the two women that shored me up were white women. But everybody, you know, everybody isn't as lucky as I am to have sensitive, you know, woke white women.
Right.
I mean, you got to have a hardcore woke white woman to have edited this book. Okay, there's no
right, not to dilute it, to take away any of its essence.
Right, but also I will say this: I'm an older woman, and this is not my first time at the rodeo. Okay,
Understood.
And so I knew my vision, and when I was going through the auction process, right, to see who was going to get the book, and you meet with people over the phone, it's sort of like, you know, a speed dating. I knew what I was looking for. And I knew that it wasn't just people saying, oh, you're brilliant, blah, 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 blah. But I needed people to get on board with my vision. Right. Because I knew where I was going. I don't follow trends. I've been doing the same thing for, you know, 24 years. I published my first poem in 1997. So I knew what my vision was, and I knew it was for the people. I wrote this book for the people. You know, some of my other books are for me, but this was for my people, to paraphrase, you know, the great Margaret Walker Alexander, for my people with their dirges and their deities. So it was important for me. And I think that we need to be training more African-Americans to go into publishing and to go into, because if you don't have that, even down to copy editing, you know, I'm a teacher, so I'm patient when someone comes to me. What does this mean? You know, but I'm also strong. I'm a powerful woman because I've earned the right to be powerful. But if you're dealing with younger folks, you know, they're just like, I don't want to lose this check, you know, and that's the way, you know, you got bills, you know, I don't want to lose this check, you know, so I can't, you know. I already have a check, you know, I already have a check. So, I mean, this was a good check. I ain't gonna lie. This was a nice check, but I do think it's very important. And then it's very important to have Black professors who were teaching Black literature, right? And now we have Black bookstagrammers, and we have all of that. This is really the same community, literary community that we've had for a very long time, but it's now in the 21st century, and we need to expand this further.
Okay. What do you want readers to glean from this book?
I want readers to know that Black women have been holding it down for this community, going all the way back to the planks of the slave ship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that's it in a nutshell. Case closed. I could add on to it. I could do all of that, but I want people to know what Black women have gone through. But I also want people to know this, because a lot of times when people read about Black suffering, they're like, I want to know joy. I don't want this suffering. And I want people to understand there is joy in naming the truth.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And you cannot have the flowers without the rain.
You really cannot. And you cannot say that you want reparations, but you don't want to hear about the journeys of our ancestors. And there is joy in me being here.
Exactly. Yes.
I'm here. They prayed for this moment, knowing that they would never see it. And many times I get very choked up when I think about this, that there are people who could not read and write, right? The law was against them being able to read and write in slavery. And here I am, a college professor, writing, telling their stories, for a story that is possible to be theirs. And I get very emotional about it because they prayed for this moment.
You're right. They did. They really did. They prayed for a lot of things that have come to fruition since slavery. It has manifested. And that's a whole nother conversation, but in some cases we have squandered those prayers of what has been transpiring in our communities in 2021.
But so we're getting there.
We're getting there, yeah.
We're getting there, but we need to understand that you can't simply talk about making that money and doing this, and you can't think that you're going to get a reparations check and then you don't want to, here's where my spirituality comes in. Ain't nobody gonna allow you to get a reparations check. None of these ancestors, if you are spitting on their legacy.
Amen. That's true. That's true.
So those are the things that I want, people to understand, and to understand that we are a mighty people.
We are.
There's a character in the book, Dean Walters. And he says, our people, what a mighty race.
Yes.
And
to
understand.
Yeah, that's correct. That was kind of his mantra at the beginning of freshman orientation.
That's it. And all of us remember that at HBCUs. When you're in the orientation, you learn the origin story. And you learn, and there's a community building that occurs at each HBCU has their community building, moments, right? And Ailey has her community building moments, right? And there are issues with HBCUs, just like there are issues with majority. But one thing about an HBCU is you never have to worry that somebody's treating you a particular way because you're Black. You never have to worry about that. If somebody don't like you, it's just, they just don't get along.
They just don't like you.
They just don't like you, or they may be, if we're talking about LGBTQ individuals, they may be homophobic,
yes.
Right, or transphobic, but we are all Black. And there is never a moment where somebody's like, well, I just don't like Black people, because you're there in the middle of it. And that's what that is what I got at Talladega. First, I was at Clark College before it was Clark Atlanta, and then I transferred to Talladega. And that was the thing. There was never a moment where I felt less than as an African American. And and I think that every young Black person, every Black child and every young Black person needs to have an experience like that, where there is always, you are fabulous, you are great, you are beautiful, you are smart, and it is because you are Black, not in spite of. And
Well
that's what I got, going to an historically Black college.
Well said. Before we wrap everything up, a few fun questions from you.
Okay.
Outside of writing, what are some of your non-work and writing hobbies that you like to do, things you like to do?
Whew. Brother, I've been on this grind for so long, I can't even remember. I do, I have a very small circle. I keep my circle tight. We kick it on the phone now, because of the pandemic. I'm learning, and now this is the nerd in me. I'm learning beginning Wolof, the West African language.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, and French. I'm a little bit more advanced in French than I am on Wolof. But Senegal, the Senegambian region, Senegal and the Gambia, that region is where the 18th century poet Phyllis Wheatley Peters is from. And so it's very dear to my heart. And they speak Wolof, and in Senegal, they speak French. So it's my dream to be able to go back, spend 2 to 3 months. Speak the
native tongue, yeah.
Right, and speak the native tongue, spend 2 to 3 months out of the year, not during the rainy season, but speak, So I do that. And I just, I kick it with friends, but, there's not much. I'm overdue for a vacation. I'm real overdue for a vacation, yeah.
During COVID, what has been your favorite guilty pleasure? That could be anything, food.
Food, brother. I have lost 15 of the 25 COVID pounds that I got COVID thick. But you know what? And I'm gonna try not to sound naughty when I say this. I have noticed that the men do not care. When you in your mask and you in the grocery store and they're like, "Hey girl, I see you." And I'm just like, I'm chubby now, and they're like, I'm looking at you, girl, So that's been interesting. But yeah, guilty pleasure has definitely been food. And also Tyler Perry shows.
Oh, okay. What's the favorite one?
Well, there was one, and then they stopped with it. But Ruthless, and
yes, yes.
I keep waiting for the new episodes to come out. But yes, because I have friends where they only, they only like August Wilson or those sort of things, right? But yeah, that's my little guilty pleasure. And Netflix soap operas, different things like that. You just get to the point. I've told people this is like I'm in my middle-aged YOLO moment, right? Okay. I'm gonna do whatever it is that makes me happy. And I used to care about what was highbrow, what was lowbrow, whatever. Now I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do me.
What? Do me.
I'm going to do me.
Outstanding. I thank you very much. I appreciate you. We have been talking with author, poet, and professor, Honorée Jeffers, and her latest debut novel, The Love Song of W.E.B. Du Bois. The book is currently on pre-sale on our website, blackbookstore.com. And if there are any other sites, please give us your social media handles and websites that you have that people can follow you.
Me?
Yes, you. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
I am BLK Library Girl, Black Library Girl on Twitter. I am just Honorée Fanonne Jeffers on Facebook. I have a public Facebook page. And then I'm Honorée Jeffers on Instagram. So I'm on all of those. I haven't ventured onto Clubhouse. That's a little bit too much for me.
Right. I understand. We thank you very much. For those who have not had a chance to have an advanced read, make sure you get your copy now. This is a great book. It depicts a great story about Blackness, families, a little history that I think that will be very intriguing in your love. The Love Stories of W.E.B. Du Bois. You can pick it up now, pre-order your copies now at blackbookstore.com. Thank you very much for joining us and continue
Thank you,
reading.
my brother. I appreciate you.